That's great. Thank you very much, Jill. As Jill just mentioned, my name is Will Murray, and I'll be taking the first half of this presentation today. And then later on, I'm going to be talking to Christian about how AstraZeneca went about planning and executing their last Workday update. So it would have been Workday 25 in their preview tenant. Some lessons learned from it, what went well, what is going to go better the next time. And then we'll open up to any questions you have, either to myself or Christian. We'll be happy to answer anything then. So just a little bit of a background, I suppose, on what I'm going to be speaking to you about. Kainos Smart has been around now for almost 2 years, and we have 35 customers. Of those 35, 22 of them have just gone through testing for the Workday 25 update window. And we've spoken to those customers and worked with them very closely during this time to find out, again, some learnings and some lessons that they have learned from this exercise, and I'm going to pass some of these on to you now. So I'm going to start off with just some basics, just to make sure everyone understands where we are and, you know, what actually is a Workday update window. So as you're all aware, anyone that is in production has a production tenant. This is your live system. It contains your live data and is what is used by your workers on a daily basis. We'll also have a sandbox tenant, which is a copy of production, and this is used to troubleshoot issues or to test any configuration changes that you may want to make to your tenant before promoting them to production. And then obviously, most importantly, for Workday updates, you have a sandbox preview window. And this is where you review and test features that are released during the preview window. And most importantly as well, is to provide feedback to Workday on anything that you see that may not be correct there. Now, again, the sandbox preview and the sandbox tenants are the same for 42 weeks of the year. For the two preview update windows, the preview tenant, sandbox preview tenant, has the newest version of Workday code in it, which will be released 5 weeks after the preview window. So I wanted to sort of bring you through when features are released in Workday, because I've been taking an interest in this recently, as some of it has been a surprise to me and some of the things that I found out from doing a little bit of investigation. So on a weekly basis, we have service update features. So these are fixes and non-impactful features. They're opt-in, but they may require configuration prior to use. So if they do require configuration, you will need to test it. There's also other things that you need to test in there to make sure everything is okay on a weekly basis. Then we have our feature releases, which are the ones that go into your preview tenant. They're released twice yearly. These are significant new features and feature enhancements, and you do need to perform release testing in your preview tenant on this, not alone to make sure that everything is still working as you imagine it should be, but also Workday really value any feedback on what you see based on the data within your tenant. So Workday obviously can test their features on their own tenants, but then there's also the need to look at what these features look like based on the data you specifically have in your own tenant. And there's also web service updates. Now these happen every 2 months, and they're specifically updating and changing the web services which are used by integrations to and from Workday. So again, these need to be checked to make sure that there's nothing happening on the web services that will impact any of your integrations. So when working with our 22 clients who are in production at the moment, one of the things I always ask them is how mature is your testing? So it may seem like a funny question, and sometimes people can't answer it, sometimes they can very accurately answer it, and I use a model which I've been using for the last 20 years in testing on all different applications called TMMI, which is the Testing Maturity Model, and it's a good way of gauging where exactly you are and where you should be going with your testing to ensure that your testing is as efficient as it should be. So there's 5 stages, as you can see here, and let me bring you through them. The first one, level 1 initial, is chaotic. This really is, if we look at it from a Workday preview window where you have 5 weeks, you don't really know what you need to test, but you know you need to test. So you spend the 5 weeks really testing as much as you can until the time runs out, without really knowing, why you're doing it, what you're expecting, what you should be concentrating on. A lot of the times this would be unscripted. You mightn't have any test cases. You mightn't have any way of actually formally reporting on any issues that you've seen. The next stage is level 2, which is managed. This is planned and monitored. So this is, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, where you actually plan and strategize what you want to do within your 5-week window, and you can report and accurately determine what you've done and what you need to do. Apologies, I've clicked on the wrong way there. Level 3 is defined. Now, this is again building on the levels that came before, and it's ensuring that your testing that has been conducted is going to be peer reviewed by other people to ensure its accuracy. Next, management and measurement. Again, building on what's been done before to manage in a much more tighter way and measure exactly what's being done and the benefits of it. And then lastly, optimization, which is from a pure testing point of view, it's defect prevention. So what you're going from is trying to find defects to level 5, which is trying to actually prevent defects. Now for myself, and this may sound funny to you, where I would recommend that you get to is level 2. Now that might seem pretty low down on the actual the scale of where you can get to, but in my experience, if you choose to go to level 2 and can make sure you're doing level 2 at a very, very good standard, then you can cherry pick different things from levels 3, 4, and 5. But once you're at level 2, I'd be quite confident that you're testing in a well-defined manner. So what does level 2 look like? Well, you really need a test strategy. The test strategy really should define what you actually do during your 5-week window and include things like entry and exit criteria. So how do you know when to start testing, and how do you know when you're finished testing? Not just the 5 weeks are up and I've got to stop. You need feature update test plans. So this is specifically what is affecting you within the preview tenant within this 5 weeks. One of our customers I spoke to recently said to me, Workday 24 was a breeze. Workday didn't really introduce anything that affected the functionality that they used, whereas Workday 25, they were pedal to the metal for the whole of their actual 5 weeks because what had been introduced really affected how they did their daily business. You should have a regression test plan. Now, a regression test plan is different from looking at what actually is changing within the Workday tenant. It's looking at all the other stuff to make sure that it's still working as it should be. You need to know roles and responsibilities, who's going to be doing the testing and who's responsible for what, who's responsible for business process testing, whether it's in any of the different functional areas, who's responsible for integrations, who's responsible for security testing. You need a test schedule. When are you going to test what? You have your 5 weeks. There are times that you want to schedule different events to happen at different times. You need to look at your test tools. Are you going to have scripted test cases? How are you going to manage those? How are you going to report on those? If you find any issues, how are you going to report them? And obviously, if you want to utilize automation, how are you going to best use the automation to maximize the Workday window for you? And how are you going to report on that? Again, probably the most important thing is the planning. Some of our customers start planning 2 months in advance of the Workday update window, but please ensure that you start planning well in advance. Don't wait till the first day to sort of think, okay, Workday 25 is here, what are we going to do? That's just going to be a recipe for disaster. Identify the key staff and resources that are required. Make sure the people that did it the last time, if they're on holidays or if they're not with your company anymore, that you have suitable replacements for them. Again, identify what in the update will affect you, and I'll talk to you in a minute about how you can do that. And what I always like to do, and I talk to our customers about, is perform a risk assessment and prioritization. So based on what actually is changing in the Workday window, look at what you need to test in more detail than other areas, and prioritize it, so you know that if you do happen to run out of time because of one thing or another, that at least you have got to the highest priority issues that will have a detrimental effect on your business if there is an issue with them. So how can you find out what in the update directly affects you? I've learned a lot over the last few weeks, to be very honest, on where you can find this information. Some of it I knew, some of it I didn't know. Workday release service update notes on a weekly basis. Within here, there's a section called What's New in Preview. This is obviously a really good place to go and look to see what's coming in the preview window. You can also see what's coming in the weekly updates in these update notes. There's a report that you can run in your tenant called the What's New in Workday report, and this will actually tell you what's new in that tenant. Now, there's a couple of different nuances about this report. So if we were in the middle of a preview tenant and I ran the report in my sandbox, I wouldn't see any of the Workday 25 or the next Workday update features listed there. Whereas if I was to run that report in my preview window during the Workday Update 25 preview window, I'd see all the new things that were coming during that window. And now if you were to run that report in production or in any of your sandbox tenants, you would see what exactly has been delivered in the last preview window. There's also a Getting Started guidebook up on Community, which is a really, really good place to go and get information. But I know again from talking to one of our customers that they'd looked at the report, they'd looked at the update notes, they'd looked at the Getting Started guidebook, and they were still a little bit confused about what exactly was coming and how it would actually impact them. So there's also a work group that you can join, which you can ask these questions to and get answers from Workday on. So if you can't figure out exactly from the documentation that's there on how it's going to affect you, make sure you join the work group and ask the questions so you can pinpoint exactly what testing you need to do. And the last thing that I found out about, that I only found out about very recently, is that there's a Workday exceptions in Community. So if you subscribe to this in Community, you'll get alerted of anything that Workday have previously said would be coming in the preview window and is now being released at a later date, or is actually being released at a later time during the Workday preview window. So if we all remember back to Workday 24, not everything was released at the beginning of the update window in the first week or the second week. Some of the features were released later in the 5-week cycle. I think Workday 25 was a lot better at that the features were there earlier in the 5-week cycle at that stage. But by subscribing to this Workday exceptions in Community, you'll get information on exactly when things are coming in, if things are actually slipping. So a lot of our customers looked at the 5-week window and they put their test schedule together, and they didn't try to do everything at the very beginning. Now, they did want to look at, obviously, the new features that were coming. You know, these are the things that are going to be most important, and you need to concentrate on them as soon as they're there to make sure that you're uptaking them correctly, you're getting the most benefit out of the features, and that your business can continue once they go into production. But our customers have also been using the Smart Security and Integrations modules within Smart to assist with their regression testing. So knowing that security is going to be as it should be, the minute you go into production is very, very important, and knowing that the integrations are all firing as they should be, as they were in Workday 24, that they will be now in Workday 25 is important, and I'll touch on some strategies for running integrations a little bit later. Once you go into week 2, again, continue looking at the new feature of manual testing, but this is when our customers have really started to utilize the business process regression testing within Smart. So it's running lots and lots of tests through Smart to ensure that the features that were existing in Workday 24 are now going to function in exactly the same way in Workday 25, and nothing has changed. And because of the power of Smart, our customers continue to run these through weeks 3 to 5 as well, just to make sure that if any of the features that were being released by Workday throughout the Workday update cycle were coming in latter weeks, then this regression test can continue on. And because using Smart, you can do it with the click of a button. There's no overhead to yourself. It's just rerunning to make sure that the results you got the previous week are the same as the results you get the next week. So what is Smart? Well, Smart is the only automated testing tool specifically designed for Workday, and it's been specifically designed for business users. So unlike any of the other automated testing tools that are out there in the market, if you want to use those, you will need technical knowledge, you will need to maintain them, you'll need to write the automation, and you'll need to just have a very technical mindset to use them. With Smart, what you get out of the box is all the automation and maintenance already done for you, with just the need to input the data that you want to test. It's software as a service, similar to Workday, so it's deployed in the cloud, and it can be pointed at any non-production tenant that you have, so whether that's Sandbox, Sandbox Preview, implementation tenants of any sort. Now, the important thing here is that you can point Smart at your Sandbox and your Sandbox Preview at the same time and run the tests against each other in parallel. Now, what that'll mean is that if you're during your preview window, you can run Smart against Workday 24 and Workday 25, as people were doing just recently, and ensuring that the results are exactly the same in both. So this is what you would have been like during your Workday update window. You would have had lots of people sitting around PCs, entering data in, checking all the features that you were live with in production, looking at the new features that were coming with the Workday 25 update. Smart can replace the majority of these with automated tests and allow these people to concentrate on the key features that they need to test manually, to look at maybe some of the UI changes that have come and even some of the new features that you may be opting into this time that you hadn't previously. Smart covers three areas. It covers core HCM, covers financials, and it covers security. So if we look at exactly what Smart actually looks like, this is a test run that I executed in Smart during the Workday 24 or Workday 25 update window. Smart allows you to create multiple business process tests, which I'm showing here. And as you can see here, what I've done are multiple hires. Once those hires have been done using Smart into your Workday tenant, I've then done some tasks on them. So things like request compensation changes, one-time payments, leave of absence. These are really high important HCM business processes, mostly because they affect payroll, I suppose, which most people are concerned with. And just to give you a little bit of a view of actually what happens when you kick off a Smart test. So Smart will launch a browser in the cloud. You won't be able to see this, but this is a video that I've actually taken from a few releases back. Smart logs into Workday and it starts entering the data into Workday as if it was a manual tester, but it's doing it as soon as Workday can actually respond to the clicks and to the data entry. So as you can see here, Smart is entering in all the data that will be required for a hire. It's going down through different selection boxes, entering in different types of data. And once it submits for the initiation, I've just paused the video here briefly, you can see that Workday is now telling Smart that the next person up is Logan McNeil and it's a change org assignments. So Smart interacts with Workday at this stage, finds out who's up next and what they need to do, will then log out or proxy out as that person, log in as the next person, and actually continue on the business process all the way through until it actually gets to the end. Again, here we can see the next step is Steve Morgan for it to do. Smart logs in as Steve Morgan, it goes to that to do, and it'll actually enter in and submit. And it does this all the way until the business process has completed. So if we come back to the test run and we look at the results here, as you can see in the test that I have highlighted here, we've done a hire and it has completed successfully and it has passed. If I click into that hire, what we can see here is actually an audit trail of everything that happened during that hire process. So everything from the hire initiation through the proposed comp, all the way down through services, to-do, reviews, approvals, and all the way down, and if necessary we can actually rescind the process here as well. But by doing it in this way and by going in and monitoring this, we can see that we have an absolute audit trail of the testing that had been done for this hire, and that it had followed exactly the right process that we required it to. Now if I come back to my test screen again, we can see that I've highlighted a fail here. And similarly, if I click on this, we can see exactly what's happened here. So this is a request one-time payment. We can see that the request one-time payment has been initiated. The second step in that one-time payment was an approval that needed to be done by Logan McNeil. And the third sort of section here was an approval. Now you can see that this has failed to complete. If I click on the red X, I can see what the error actually is. So this is an error that I see quite a lot within Workday, particularly during implementations, but we can see it when there's been security changes as well. And what's actually happened here is that no one is assigned to do the approval step in this certain condition. And we can see that that error has been spelled out to us very easily in Smart there. But I can also, if you notice, there's a screenshot next to that. If I click on that screenshot, you can actually see what has happened within Workday at that time. So we can see that we're logged in as Logan McNeil and we're doing the one-time payment for Jill Cole. And we can see that the next task is actually unassigned and needs to be reassigned to someone else. So by running this, we can very quickly go and see that we have a configuration issue here because of something that's happened, and we need to go and address this before Workday 25 gets released to production. Similar to business processes, Smart also allows you to run multiple security tests. Now, what security tests in Smart are, it's literally checking what people can and do and see against objects within Smart. So whether that is people in specific security roles checking what they can do and see against employees, against organizations, against positions, against any business object within Workday. What you do with this is you give Smart expected results and then you click Go. And what Smart will do is it will check your expected results against what actually happens within Workday when you try to perform those tasks. And again, I have a video here that hopefully explains this in more detail. So again, what Smart will do is it will log in, it will go to the person that you want to log in as, and it will start checking against different business objects. Now over here on the right, you can see this is the test that I actually set up in Smart. So it's got the different types of related actions and whether or not they should be visible. Y obviously indicates it should be visible. So Smart will check all the way down through those tests against the business object to make sure everything is correct, and it'll move on to the next test. So the next test, I'm just logging in as a different individual. So I'm logging in as Betty Lou now, and I'm checking against her tests. So if we look here, the expected result we gave Smart here was that Betty Lou should be able to see request compensation change, and she can't. So Smart will log that as an error. It will continue on again down through the business or down through each of the tests. As you can see here, create requisition. We said that Betty shouldn't be able to see this, but she actually can. So Smart will log that as an error, and it will continue on going down through the business or down through the security tests until it actually reaches the end. Again, if I come back into my test run, we can see here the first one has failed. The rest have passed. I'm happy with those. That means that the expected results that we supplied Smart with actually matches the actual result what Smart went in and checked. But if I drill in to see what exactly happened with this failed result, so we can see here within this test that Smart has checked 7 different things all around compensation. We had given different expected results. At this stage, it's John Johnson. The user is John Johnson. We're checking against an object of Niall Nugent. And we expected that John Johnson, based on the security that he has been set up with in Workday, should not be able to see any of Niall Nugent's compensation. But we can see here that our expected result does not actually meet our actual result, and Smart has marked it as a fail. Again, we take a screenshot, and if we click on that, we can see that we're logged in as John Johnson. We're looking at Niall Nugent business objects. We're looking at Niall, and we can see that John actually does have access to view compensation for Niall Nugent. Now, if this isn't the way that we want Smart or we want Workday to be configured, this is going to be a serious problem, because unfortunately, once someone sees something, there's no way of rescinding it. Now, we have some very, very powerful features in Smart. One of them that I love myself is the re-execute button. So I've just highlighted this here on a test run that I previously ran. Now, what this does by clicking on it is it will just literally re-execute the same test that you've run previously. But what you can do is you can choose a tenant to point Smart at. So you can imagine having your sandbox or your sandbox preview tenants. You can point Smart at your sandbox tenant. First of all, run your test. You're happy with the results. Now you can come in here and point it at a different tenant if necessary. But Smart also gives you the option to schedule this test. So you might want to run this during the day. You might want to run this on the Monday at 3 a.m. so that once a change has been made in Workday, you schedule over the weekend, you schedule Smart to kick off at 3 a.m. on Monday morning, and by the time you come into work, Smart will have completed all its tests and it will show you what has passed and what has failed. And you can very, very quickly go in and just determine exactly what has changed. One of the newest features that we've just released, which is really, really exciting, is that you can actually set your test case results automatically. So what this means is that if I re-execute my test case, it will look at the results that I got the last time. And when I mean results, I mean not just if it's passed or failed, but the actual steps that the business process has gone down through and the individuals or security groups that have actually done those steps within each business process. So if I set my tests to automatically do the results, Smart will compare the results that I get. So what we might see there is that some parts of the business process aren't actually firing, even though it's the same data that you're entering. Again, as we saw earlier, that sometimes your security may have changed, so people may not actually be assigned to the security role to do any of the approvals or do some of the sub-steps. So by rerunning this with this set to yes, it means you can get to the absolute point here and see that what has passed and what has failed. But the great thing about Smart is that these tests don't just run one after another. Smart launches these in parallel. So you can have multiple tests running in parallel at the same time. So if you were to do these tests manually, obviously you're going to be doing one after another. With Smart, they're done in parallel, meaning that the time to execute has reduced dramatically, and the time to re-execute will be reduced dramatically as you go on running them more and more. So looping all the way back to talk about how people have actually been using Smart and some of the lessons learned from during their Workday update window. The majority of our customers, if not all, have been relying heavily on the security module. So you can imagine you're in a Workday update window and you want to make sure that everything is as it should be. Now, as I showed you earlier, it's possible to create tests within Smart to actually say, I want security to be like this. But there's also a feature in Smart that allows you to, with some very low amount of data, to get Smart to actually baseline your configuration. And what that is Smart will go and it will create all the tests for you based on your security as it is at that time. Then being able to re-execute that on a Monday morning when the Workday update has actually happened, you can confirm that the security that was in Workday 24, for example, in the last preview window, is now going to be exactly the same as it is in Workday 25. And you can run this all the way through the Workday update window to make sure that everything stays the same. Now, our customers are actually using this on a weekly basis as well. So they're not just using it for the 5-week window, they're actually scheduling it to kick off and run for each of the update windows as well. Business process testing. I spoke a little bit about this already, but some of our customers and most of our customers have been using this, using Smart to regression test the existing features that shouldn't have changed within the preview window, allowing them then to concentrate on the new features and some of the more higher risk areas and being able to dedicate their staff specifically to those areas. Integration testing. We have some excellent process for actually running integration testing with Smart. One of our customers was the first to do this, was T. Price. And the way that they do this is that on the Friday before a Workday update is actually released, they will have their sandbox and their sandbox preview tenant refreshed with the same data. Then over that weekend, obviously the sandbox preview is updated to the newest version of Workday. And on a Monday morning, they have scheduled all their integrations to execute in both tenants using Smart. So T. Price have just over, I think, 140 integrations. So using Smart, they can kick off the integrations in both tenants at the same time, and then they can actually compare the results of the integrations in their sandbox and their sandbox preview tenant. Now, from what they were telling me, usually you know, maybe 100, 135 of those integrations will be the same. But there will be some that they'll need to go and look at to make sure that, you know, the results are not the same, and they'll need to make some adjustments. Using SMART and using the integration testing in this process, it allows them to focus entirely on where the differences are. And obviously, one of the most important things that you need to do in a Workday update as well is training prep. Whether this is creating job aids or updating your training and getting people to actually go in and do training on whether it's new UI or new features. So using SMART to regression test features allows these people not to concentrate on the testing, but actually to go in and look at the training. And SMART can, it can prepare testing material within your tenant. So it will prepare real-life scenarios based on data that you give it, which will bring the BPs to specific points in the process. And this will allow your managers, will say, to go into the areas of the business processes that are relevant to them, to where changes have been made, to where the UI has changed, rather than having to go through, having to hire, having to do a request comp change just to get to an approval or anything like that. So you're getting really, really good benefit from training preparation as well. Again, who would benefit from SMART? Obviously, I've sort of brought you through how you can prepare for your Workday update. I've gone you through how you can do when you should do your manual testing, and I've gone through how you can look at leveraging SMART to enhance that testing. So I'll call out a couple of the things that I have up here. Anyone that has an aversion to risk, I hope everyone does, or an audit requirement to demonstrate what testing has taken place, by who, when, and what has been tested. Anyone with complex business processes. So the more complex the business process, the more testing you need to do on that to make sure that the condition rules are being hit, to make sure that you're testing everything that really is required. If you've got a large number of integrations, particularly in payroll, you're going to have to test these to make sure that everything is as is. And obviously regression testing. But also if you're changing any configuration, SMART is a great way to ensure that the change to that configuration will not break your business process or security in any way. So with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Christian. Christian is going to tell you exactly as I mentioned earlier about what happened with AstraZeneca over the last month and a half, and then I'm going to have a discussion with Christian after that. Just ask some questions about that, and if you have any questions, please type them in now, and I'll ask Christian as we go.
Okay, thank you, Will. So I'm Christian Suykens. I'm from Brussels in Belgium, and I'm the global release manager in the HR IT team in AstraZeneca. And so I'm responsible for testing and the releases of our different HR IT systems, such as Workday. I joined AstraZeneca in 2006. Before that, I worked in IT as consultant. And I was a test lead for many countries worldwide, implementing our previous global HR system at AstraZeneca. So I have much experience there in regression testing and release testing and everything that can go wrong. So AstraZeneca, we went live with Workday this year in April. So it was just after release 24. So this release, Workday 25, was the very first one for us. And the modules that we use at AZ are the HR core module and performance and talent management. We haven't implemented it yet, but we are also looking at advanced comp, time, and recruiting as well. So as said, Workday 24 was done just before our go live in April. So basically, the implementation partner, they turned off all optional features, so we didn't do much testing there. So 25 was the first release for us. So how did we prepare for that release? As Will mentioned, there was a new report that we ran in Sandbox Preview. So that gives basically, I think it was 2,000 rows of new features or updated features within the tenant. So it was a big job with the HR IT team, the business analysts. They reviewed all of those features. They checked what's in scope, what's not in scope. Obviously, with it being the first time, we spend a lot of time on this because not everyone was experienced with all the different modules which we have turned on or not. We also went to community. So on community, you have many what's new videos, PDF documents that are posted by Workday with the whole explanation of all the new features. So those we looked as well. We spent the first weeks of the release testing watching all those videos, reading all those comments posted by Workday. And based on that, we took a decision on the optional features within the release on what to do with them. So do we turn them on? Do we turn them off? And actually, what we did on a big majority of them is we said, well, we are interested in the feature, but in the first release, we don't have much time. So we will analyze it after. So we will not turn it on right now, but we will kick off a separate small project and look at it after the go live of the release. So based on the features that we did opt to enable and the features that have changed that had an impact on us, we defined a number of test scripts that needed to be executed. And there the testing team started creating those test scripts. But then luckily we also had the Kainos Smart tool. So I went together with two other colleagues to a training course in June at the offices of Kainos to get a training on the tool. And then, yeah, a bit unlucky with that release came in August. Many of us took holiday in July. So just before the release, we didn't have too much experience yet in the system, so we lost a bit of time there. So we had to prioritize, and the two major things we wanted to use the Kainos Smart tool for this release was security and integrations testing. So we have an external payroll system, and we have, I think, 64 different integrations from Workday to that payroll system, different integration for each of the countries we have. So what we wanted to do is make sure with the Kainos tool to launch the integrations for all the 64 countries, then do the hiring and promotion and a termination for each of those countries, and then run those integrations again. And by doing this in Sandbox and in Sandbox Preview with the exact same test script, because one of the nice things about this tool is that you can, with just one click on the button, execute the hire in your Sandbox and in your Sandbox Preview. So by doing the identical same process in Sandbox and Sandbox Preview, we knew that the file generated by the integration from Sandbox needed to be identical to the file generated in Sandbox Preview. So that obviously was a big comfort to the people from the integrations team to see that indeed, I think it was week 3 of the 5-week testing window that we could prove that all the integrations gave the exact same file from the testing. And then the second part was security. So as Will explained, you have 2 parts there. You can test on what an employee can see on another employee, and you can also test what they can do, so the related actions on another employee. So we started for the 64 countries to define a security matrix in Excel. Like for every country, we try to find an employee, a manager of that employee, manager +1, and then also an HR view only, administrative, a talent person. And then we started creating all the tests for security. So for example, what is a manager supposed to see on an employee? What is HR admin supposed to see on an employee? And that's for all the different data fields that are available in the Smart tool, and also for all the available actions. So from the training, it seems pretty straightforward to do that, but actually we spent lots and lots of time on it for various reasons. For example, one of the things we found out is that on a certain country, the city failed. So manager could not see, or HR admin could not see the city from an employee, where we expected, and we saw from the other countries that the city was visible. And then, okay, you start investigating, and then it turns out that that country is not maintaining the city, for example. So that was very nice to have that finding from the testing. Another thing that came out was that one country, the HR admin could do many more things than the HR admins from the other countries with the same test script. So when raised with the security team, we found out that indeed that HR admin was given a wrong security role, and they were not aware. So it was very, very good that we found that out with this tool. And also to leadership team, it was very impressive that we could tell that if you counted all the security tests that we executed this way, that we had more than 50,000 tests that were executed. So that was very good to give the reassurance that we did a sufficient amount of testing. Will, should I already go to the lessons learned, or do you want to stop me?
Yeah, I was going to ask you just one question there, and it was something you said at the beginning, and it was a huge figure. Did you mention when you looked at the What's New in Preview report, there was over 1,000 different things in there?
Yeah, actually, if you run that report and you don't filter on modules, you get 2,000 lines in Excel.
Wow, and I presume that that was a challenge in itself, just to actually go down through that to see what has actually impacted you, you know, where you need to dedicate your testing in your 5 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the lessons learned, because we spent lots of time on that Excel file, and in the next release, we will focus much more on what's on community and what's new videos and the PDF documents, because the high impact changes are there, and the Excel is so huge, and it contains many small updates to some features. Yeah, you can easily get lost in that Excel.
Yeah, you're reading down that the upload photo is changing, and you don't really care because something is happening in compensation you need to concentrate on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. So that's a good way of sort of managing risk and looking at prioritization, which is brilliant. I was going to ask you, you know, what are you going to do differently for Workday 26? What are your lessons learned, and how are you going to sort of leverage that knowledge?
Yeah, first, and that was the #1 for us, the lesson learned with the release, Workday 25 being in August. We struggled a lot with people being on holiday. So some people were there on week 1, but then left on week 2, and we were stuck. So next release is probably going to be better because it's February, March. But then again, the release after that will again be the summer holiday. So that's certainly a lesson learned to make sure that we keep the most important people available at that time.
Well, I think that's great that you're actually thinking about that now, and it's sort of 47 weeks away, or 45 weeks away. So there's something you can do about it, I suppose, if you need to train other people up, so you don't have dependency on one individual. But by looking and planning well in advance, that it's something you will be able to manage.
Yeah, and then another thing we learned was we only found out in the last week of our testing that in the onboarding screen for the newcomer, the layout was completely changed by this release. And yeah, it was a lot of panic because it was just a few days before the release. And that's just because we did so much of the regression testing automated with Smart that we didn't actually go in and do the full end-to-end hire plus onboarding process ourselves. So that's also something that we will add to the lessons learned and we'll do in the next release, that for at least one country we will do the process manually to make sure that the screen still looks correct, because that's one thing that Smart doesn't catch yet. Yeah,
and you're absolutely spot on with that one, and I know that Workday themselves recommend that the UI changes are something, it's not just the functionality you need to look at it, it actually is the UI changes, and I know there has been a lot discussed about the new UI changes over the last few weeks, and sort of the impact that that's having on different organizations. So I would definitely agree with you there that Smart should not be 100% of the testing of all areas, but I suppose if you can use it to do your conditions and your boundaries, your negative and your positive, allowing people then to do a couple of tests through it manually, that you're still going to save the time on it, hopefully.
Yeah, and then another thing where we made a mistake was on the report testing. So in the first 2 weeks, we focused really hard on integrations testing and getting our hire and promotion and termination scripts working correctly. And then we only tested the reports in week 3. But by week 3, there were so many changes done in Sandbox and Sandbox Preview that the two systems were not identical anymore. So doing a file compare was really difficult. So we ended up only verifying that the headers of the report didn't change. But I think in the next release, on day 1, we will test the reports when the systems are still identical and when the file compare should match perfectly.
Will, we seem to have lost your audio. Are you on mute, Will?
Oh, sorry, Jill, I was sorry. I've started going in and out of apologies for that. What I was saying there was that that's similar to the example I gave about T-row price earlier, that it is exactly that type of testing that they scheduled for week 1 to make sure that any of the functional testing of business processes isn't having an impact on their integrations or their reports.
Yeah. And then there's one thing, there's one unexpected outcome from this release that we actually got in so far, and that's a new language that was introduced by Workday that we were not aware of. I think it was for Malaysia that they introduced the new local language, and one of the side effects is that the employees from Malaysia that didn't have in their preferences the Malaysian language, no, English selected as default, they all got defaulted to the new Malaysian language. And actually it was not in the release notes, so it was not in the Excel. So that's something that Workday now told us, yep, in each release you have to check manually which new languages have arrived and test on those.
And how did you find out about that, Christian? Was that through contacting Workday, or did it come out in a community post, or?
Well, no, actually, the whole country of Malaysia, at least the AZ employees, they raised tickets because they all complained that on Monday, all of a sudden, Workday was no longer in English. So we raised a support case with Workday, and then Workday explained. They showed us the community page where it shows which new language is targeted for which release, so that you can know in the release testing when the new languages are coming.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the influx of Jiras probably was a good sign. Something was up. Excellent. So, Christian, just before I sort of get to some of the questions, I was just wondering if there was any other lessons learned or anything that, you know, what is the #1 thing you'd highly recommend based on your experience of, I know it was 67 different countries or different geographic locations that you were testing across?
Definitely the #1 recommendation is to get that big, if you want to do the same, to get that big Excel before the release testing starts, so that you know that you have a working employee, a working manager with the correct roles, that you don't have to waste your time during the release testing at getting all that data, because that was one of the problems that we had.
Cool. Yeah, completely understand. So again, going back to, don't just start on day 1 of the Workday update. Make sure you have your plan and your strategy together, and you know exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've had quite a few questions in. So Christian, they're all addressed to me. You seem to have possibly answered everyone's questions with what you were saying, which says more about you than it does about me, I suppose. So I'll just get to some of the questions that I've been asked here through the questions section. So the first one is, how do you manage test scenarios in case your business process approval steps change from one Workday release to another? So the great thing about that specifically is that Smart automatically handles the approvals. So you don't need to make any updates. Smart will still go through and it will use the new approval steps. The reason being that Smart reads your Workday configuration in real time. So if any changes are made, Smart automatically adapts to those. And then next question from the same person is, Same question regarding security. As the company evolves and there are org changes affecting security, what is the average level of test scenario maintenance required? So the great thing about this is you can do this in a number of different ways. Obviously, if you re-execute your tests, Smart will flag up to you that changes have been made. You know, it will mark it as a fail. The expected won't meet the actual, and it'll show you the screenshot. Now, what you can do at that stage, if they're minimal, is you can go in and you can just edit within Smart itself. You can very quickly edit the test to just change the Y to an N. Now, if those changes are a lot more than minimal ones, the new baselining feature can actually be used. So what you can do is you can just actually, with the top level data that you want to test, you can press the button and say, get me the baseline, and Smart will go and actually get the new baseline for you so that when you run it the next time, it will actually be representative of any of the security changes that you've made. So hopefully that answers the question. Next question, what is the level of effort to load the tool for the first time and to get the details for testing? I.e., in order for Smart to perform the test, it must know the data details of our config. Absolutely. So what we do is when you sign up for Smart, we also advise on a number of different professional services options that you can take from us. The lowest level of those is where we will actually go and configure Smart with your tenant, and we will work with you for a day or two to find out what you want to test, what we are seeing that our other customers are testing, and recommendations on that, and we will discuss your specific tenant config details with you. We then go away and actually create a number of tests for you before we come back on site and give you training. Now, at the end of the professional services and training engagement at our lowest level, we guarantee you that you'll have 100 tests or 1,000 tests split between security and business process and integrations available to you. The great thing about that is that I do know myself that there are customers, Workday customers out there who aren't running 1,000 tests for the whole Workday update window. But even before you click the button go for the first time with Smart, once we've engaged with you, got you up and running with Smart, you're going to have 1,000 tests there. So then it's up to yourself on whether you want to expand on those, whether you want to move into new areas, or whether you want to continue working with us to actually expand that. And there are a number of different professional services options you can take. Next question from Andy Flood is Smart useful for first-time implementations of Workday? Please explain. It absolutely is, Andy, and I suppose I really concentrated on the post-go-live for Workday updates this time, but I'd be more than happy to reach out to you after this and discuss how Smart can be used for implementation. At a very high level, Smart can be used for business process testing all the way from unit testing to end-to-end testing through UAT and into production. But integration similarly and security all the way through as well, so that you're testing your security on an ongoing basis. I'm not going to speak for Christian here, but I know I was involved with the AstraZeneca testing during their implementation, and there was, because as I mentioned earlier, AstraZeneca went live in 67 different geographical locations. There was 2,500 tests actually within Smart that were run on a weekly basis during end-to-end testing. So, you know, it can be really, really beneficial during implementation, and then obviously once the tests are there, once you go live, all you're doing is re-executing those for each of the Workday updates, each of the weekly updates if you want to, and any configuration changes. Next question here, can it be connected to impl and prod tenants at the same time? So Smart can be it can be connected to anything apart from a prod tenant. We do not allow you to run automation on a production tenant, and I would imagine if you asked Workday, they'd say you shouldn't be. But you can connect Smart to any other tenant type, and as many tenants as you want to. So I know some of our customers have 10, 11, 12 tenants, and they're running Smart against each of them, so there's absolutely no problem there with that. What level of access would Smart need to access our systems? Assume implementation level access. Another good question. We need implementation level access for approximately 1 day. So we will go in and we will configure Smart to actually work with your tenant. After that, we don't need implementation access anymore. So we have worked very closely with Workday to ensure that the security around Smart is tied down, and Workday are happy with the way that Smart actually interacts with Workday tenants. We have recently, actually today, we've just gone through our SOC 2 audit, and we've passed, which is fantastic news, and we have a lot of documentation on exactly how security is done within Smart and how we interact with your tenants. So if you do reach out to us, we will be happy to share that with you as well. Is there a library of test scenarios that is delivered by Smart? I wouldn't say quite a library. So because, as one of the earlier questions was asked, that each of the tenants are configured in a different way, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all for this. But what we do, based on the knowledge and experience we have with working with our 35 customers, is we leverage the experience of how they test, what they test, how they go about testing. I learned an awful lot from the AstraZeneca project, looking at global and local rules and how you could split your tests around it to make sure that you're getting the coverage that you need. So we work through our professional services team to sit with you and give you the recommendations based on what we've seen in the past and what you should be testing, and also sort of work with you to expand that out on anything more that you do on that. Next question, what aspects of payroll does Smart help with? So what we're seeing with our customers from a payroll perspective is that, and it's similar, I suppose, to Christian sort of touched on it briefly earlier there with the testing of the integration testing, is that to fully test your payroll systems, you'll need to actually produce files that have quite a varied and data set within them. So during implementations, Smart can be used to input data in through the system, through the front end, so through the business processes and the business logic, so that it then flows down through the integrations and creates the files that can be used for payroll testing. Now obviously during implementations, I always think of 4 things that you need to test there. It's firstly the integration launches and completes, secondly the file is produced, thirdly the file is in the correct format, and fourthly the data that's actually in that file is correct. So it allows you to concentrate on the data and know the data that you should be coming out the other side. Again, when you're into production, similar to what T-Rowe Price are doing, it allows you to actually run the integrations on 2 systems at the same time and to compare the results that are coming out the other end, so that you can be assured that the files that are going to any of your payroll providers are the same. Now I'm not sure if that question was specifically about Workday payroll. If it was, it's not something that we support at the moment, but it is on our roadmap for the next feature to be released. How much time and effort does it take to define, set up the test scenarios? Again, this is something that we do from a professional services point of view, and as I mentioned, there are a number of different ways that you can interact with that. If I look at the lowest level of the professional services, which is 160 hours, so approximately 4 weeks, and that will get you Smart set up, it'll get you training, and it'll get you approximately 1,000 test cases. So hopefully you can extrapolate out from that one. Where are the login credentials stored if testing with real user data and accounts? So the thing about this is that we don't actually need your login credentials. So we allow you to use Smart with, sorry, I'm just seeing there, am I having a problem with my audio? Can everyone hear me?
No, we can hear you fine.
Jill, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. That was from a while ago, that message.
Okay. Oh, sorry, okay. Sorry, so I just lost my login credentials. So we give you 2 options within Smart. The one that the majority of our customers are using is actually Proxy. So what we will do is we will log in as a Kainos Smart Insys user, which is a specific Smart user, and then we'll use that user to actually proxy around. So you don't need to give any login credentials at all, apart from the name of the user that you want to initiate the business process by, or the security test or the integration by. If you choose not to not to use Proxy, we have another way that we can actually log in and log out as users without you giving us any passwords or credentials. All we do need is your Workday user account. Again, for me, I do know from talking to other customers, other companies and other partners that I think Proxy is being used so much these days that it's probably something that we'd all recommend is used. So Jill, I just see that we've run over there. Do you want me to continue on for another few minutes? There's another one or two questions here.
You have another couple of questions there, and we still have lots of attendees online, so if you would like to carry on and go through as many questions as you can, we're absolutely fine to continue.
Okay, cool. Once I see people dropping off, I'll know to stop. So there's another question there. How is the end-to-end integration testing is automated, especially dealing with upstream and downstream systems to ensure the data are correctly uploaded to seek the testing sign-off? Okay, so Smart really, its boundaries are Workday, so we do not interact with any upstream or downstream systems. What Smart does allow you to do is it does allow you to input files using Smart. So for inbound integrations, you can supply files through Smart that will automate the input of them through the integrations, and you'll be able to check that the integrations are fired correctly, that there's no errors, that there's no warnings, and that that data has actually successfully got into Workday. For data that's coming out of Workday, we do stop with the actual creation of the files. And I do know that you know, if you are testing in Sandbox or Sandbox Preview, you really should have the delivery mechanism disabled anyway for these integrations, because the last thing you want is for dummy files or test files to be delivered to your actual providers in any way. So again, Smart will assist with the production of that file. That file can then be compared. There is a section within Smart that allows you to do comparisons with other files that have been previously created or created in other tenants, and you can very, very quickly see if they're the same or if there's any differences, and again go directly to those differences. Next question, could we update the security for users after every refresh of Sandbox from the production tenant? So let me just think about that one. Can we update the security for users? So yeah, you can use the baseline feature. So it's pretty simple that once you give sort of some very high-level data with Smart, so what security roles, what individuals, what objects you want to test against, by using the baseline button within Smart, Smart will then go and actually recreate those tests for you with the Ys and Ns, the visible or not visibles, pre-populated as your data is configured within your tenant at that time. So that's quite easy and quite quick to do as well. So I think that's it. Jill, the next few are around just you know, reaching out to people who want to sort of discuss it in more detail.
That's correct, or asking if we are going to be sharing the recording, which we are. So if you have any closing remarks, and Will, before we close the webinar.
I just again like to thank everyone for joining. I'm seeing quite a large amount of the audience has stayed on till the end, which is brilliant. It means hopefully that the webinar has been really helpful to you all. I particularly like to thank Christian. I think his insights have been absolutely fantastic. It's been great talking to him. I know, Christian, I'm going to continue on talking to you to find out your insights of how things are going throughout the next few updates and before as well. So thank you for that, and obviously thank you, Jill, for helping with the logistics today.
Thank you very much.
Also, one thing that I did say, or sorry, I need to move on to here, is that we are at Rising next week. We're at booth number 260, and if you are at Rising, please come and join us there, and we will absolutely be happy to answer any questions or show you some live demos of Smart as well.
Thank you very much, Will and Christian, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, planning for the next Workday update. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback for us. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kainos Smart and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.